All right, honey, come sit by me for a second. Take a deep breath. Nothing dramatic, just enough to let your shoulders drop a little. If you've ever noticed yourself getting attached to someone in a way that feels bigger than the situation, like your mood starts shifting based on how available they are, like closeness settles you and distance makes your body tense, and no amount of logic ever really seems to help, then we're not just talking about attraction. For a lot of people, this kind of attachment grows out of anxious attachment. And when anxious attachment meets uncertainty, it can slowly turn into limerence. That's what we're going to talk about today. Not to label you, not to box you in, and definitely not to suggest there's something wrong with how you love. I want to help you understand why your need for reassurance can quietly turn into fixation. Why certain people feel emotionally magnetic, even when the connection keeps hurting you. And why walking away can feel almost impossible, even when part of you knows it should be easier than continuing to endure this pain. Because once you understand what's actually happening in your nervous system, the shame starts to loosen. And then things begin to make a lot more sense. Anxious attachment isn't about being needy. Let's start here because this matters. Anxious attachment isn't about being needy. It isn't about being dramatic. And it isn't about wanting too much. It's about safety. When you have an anxious attachment style, your nervous system is really sensitive to closeness. Connection feels calming. Proximity helps your body settle. Distance, though, feels destabilizing. And I don't mean dramatic distance, I mean small things. A slower reply, a shorter message, a shift in tone you can't quite explain. Your body reacts before your mind has time to catch up. So underneath your thoughts, your nervous system is often asking one quiet, persistent question, even if you're not aware of it. Am I still connected? That question doesn't come from insecurity. It comes from early experiences where closeness wasn't steady. Maybe comfort was sometimes there and sometimes not. Maybe reassurance depended on someone's mood or stress level. Maybe love was real, but inconsistent. So your body learned to stay alert in relationships. Not because you were weak, but because paying attention helped you stay connected. Why limerence fits so easily into this pattern. Now here's where limerence enters the picture. Limerence thrives on uncertainty, on inconsistency, on emotional unpredictability. An anxious attachment is especially sensitive to those exact conditions. When someone is emotionally clear and steady, your nervous system can relax. There's nothing to track, nothing to monitor. But when someone is inconsistent, something else happens. Your nervous system activates. You think more. You replay conversations. You analyze tone and timing. You look for signs, not because you're trying to control the other person, not because you're manipulative or clingy, but because your body is trying to regulate itself. Over time, that regulation seeking starts to orbit one specific person. Your nervous system begins to associate relief with them. And that's how anxious attachment can slowly slide into limerence, not because you chose obsession, but because your system latched onto the most available source of relief it could find. The reassurance loop. For someone with anxious attachment, reassurance feels like relief. A kind message calms you. A warm response softens your chest. A moment of closeness lets your body exhale. But when reassurance is inconsistent, your nervous system learns to chase it. You wait for the text. You reread the last interaction. You check your phone more than you want to admit. Each small sign of closeness soothes you for a moment. And when it fades, the anxiety comes back, so the cycle repeats. This doesn't mean you're obsessed with the person. It means your body is seeking relief and believes this person is the source. Limerence isn't really about desire in the way we usually think about desire. It's about regulation, and anxious attachment is especially vulnerable to turning people into regulators. Why it starts to feel so personal. This is usually the hardest part. When reassurance doesn't come, anxious attachment turns inward. You don't just feel disappointed, you feel exposed. Your mind fills in the silence with questions like, what did I do wrong? Why am I not enough? Why did things change? What did I miss? Limerence makes this worse. Because when your emotional regulation is tied to one person, every moment of distance feels like a judgment, not on the relationship, but on you, your worth, your value, your lovability. But here's the thing, most people never get told. Your nervous system isn't reacting to rejection, it's reacting to uncertainty. And uncertainty feels unbearable when your body learned early on that connection could disappear without warning. You're not wanting the wrong things. I want to be very clear about this. People with anxious attachment want connection, consistency, emotional closeness. Those are not unreasonable needs. The problem isn't what you want. The problem is that limerence convinces you that you have to earn those things by waiting, by hoping, by staying focused on someone who can't offer steadiness, by tolerating emotional instability longer than you should. That's not love. That's a survival strategy. It's your nervous system doing the best it can to stay connected, and it's exhausting. Why certain people feel so magnetic. If you have anxious attachment, emotionally inconsistent people often feel more compelling than steady ones. Not because you enjoy suffering, not because chaos excites you, but because inconsistency keeps your nervous system engaged. It gives your body something to track. So when anxious attachment meets someone who's avoidant, unavailable, or unpredictable, the dynamic can feel intense, alive, meaningful, charged. The highs feel euphoric. The lows feel devastating. And that intensity gets mistaken for chemistry. But intensity isn't chemistry, and it isn't intimacy either. It's activation. Your nervous system is on high alert, constantly scanning for safety. And limerence feeds on that alertness. A gentle reality. Check. Let me slow this down for a second. If someone consistently makes you anxious, confused, or unsure where you stand, your system may interpret that anxiety as attachment, but attachment built on anxiety will always feel unstable. Real connection doesn't require constant reassurance to feel secure. It doesn't require you to monitor or perform. And if you've never experienced steadiness before, it can feel unfamiliar, sometimes even boring. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It means your nervous system isn't used to peace yet. Why limerence hits. Anxious attachment. So hard. When you have anxious attachment, your emotional radar is always on. You notice subtle shifts, small changes, tiny signs of distance. That sensitivity isn't a flaw, it's responsiveness. But limerence turns responsiveness into fixation. Your thoughts loop because your body is alert. Your mind keeps circling because your system doesn't feel safe enough to rest. You're not weak for this. You're trying to protect connection with the tools you learned early on. But without safety, those tools start working against you. The cost of outsourcing regulation. One of the most painful parts of anxious attachment-driven limerence is how much regulation gets outsourced. Your mood starts depending on their responses. Your sense of worth rises and falls with their availability. Your body only feels calm when they're close. That's a lot to carry. Not because you're dependent, but because one single person can never sustainably regulate another person's nervous system. Eventually, something gives. And when it does, it often feels like abandonment or rejection. But really, it's your system asking for support that doesn't hinge on one person. This isn't permanent. Anxious attachment isn't who you are. It's how your nervous system learned to stay connected. And limerence isn't a failure of self-control or maturity. It's what happens when that attachment system gets stuck on one person as its primary regulator. Here's the hopeful part. Once you understand this pattern, you can start separating connection from constant anxiety. You can learn to soothe your system without outsourcing your worth. You can start noticing when intensity is actually activation, not intimacy. And slowly, your body learns that closeness doesn't have to hurt to be real. If this put words to something you've been living with, know that you're not broken. You weren't too much. You weren't asking for the wrong things. And you weren't imagining the pain. Your nervous system was doing the best it could with the tools it learned early on. And now, you're learning new ones. If this resonated, do Big Sis a favor and like the video so it reaches other people who are quietly blaming themselves for attachment patterns they never chose. Subscribe if you want more conversations like this, the kind that help you understand yourself without shame or urgency. If you feel compelled, leave a comment and share what felt familiar. Sometimes seeing your experience reflected back helps someone else feel less alone. And if someone came to mind while you were listening, someone who keeps getting stuck in the same painful attachment cycles, feel free to share this with them. Stay with me, because in the next episode, we're going to talk about why limerence feels like obsession you can't control, what's happening in your brain when thoughts loop, and why willpower alone never fixes it. Big Sis has your back. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.